Good evening, good evening. Hello, I hope you can hear me. Welcome everybody to our webinar. It's Heidi here and I'm here with my colleague Val from Future Green. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're dialing in from Hong Kong, so it's our evening. I know there are lots of people from all over the world here, so good morning or good afternoon wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to spend the next hour with us, where we'll be talking you through some food sustainability challenges and how you can address them with business. And we've got some really great case studies to share with you. So hopefully we can inspire you to make change in your own businesses where it comes to food sustainability. So we're going to get started right away. And I hope you're all here. I can't see how many numbers are in, but we had hundreds of sign-ups. So we'll get started and let others join as they come in. All right, so welcome to our 101. We often run these, never to this sort of size of audience. So thanks for coming over and being with us this evening. We are going to cover about 5 of the areas in our Future Green framework. Hopefully there'll be something there for everyone. And let me just talk you through what we're going to share with you in the next hour. Talk a little bit about our history and where we've come from in the last few years. What exactly do we mean by food sustainability, covering 5 areas, as I mentioned, of our framework. And then some things, what you can do. So we'll talk very big picture, super high level, and then come down into more actionable items and make it very practical. Finish off with a business case and some ways that you can stay in contact with us over the next few months to work on your food sustainability plans. And of course, we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So do keep those questions coming, think about them and pop them in the comments as we go through the next hour. So a little bit of history, because quite a few businesses know us as Fume Good Hong Kong. We started here about 4 or 5 years ago, 2019, launched a license program and really rallied the food service sector in food sustainability and helping them with their audits to benchmark themselves in this space, which was fairly new. So with this program, we really put food sustainability on the map. And we also ran the Fume Good Awards here in Hong Kong for three years in a row. Very exciting, getting businesses to compete on sustainability, which was fantastic. And we also ran quite a few consultancy projects, bespoke projects. Also very excited that we managed to get our B Corp. So some of you working in consultancy, I know there are quite a few consultants on the call. You'll know that this is really a stamp of approval, showing the world that we're a purpose-led business. And we got that in 2022. So that's really put us on the map. And sharing this with 5,000 other B Corps around the world. And finally, we went out on our own in earlier this year as Future Green, rebranding, and realized we need to work with more than just food service if we're going to address the food system here in Hong Kong, food system challenges. And today we work with schools, we work with retailers, we work with banks. So really a wide range. Any kind of business that serves food in a public space, we're there. And today, training and facilitation is really our bread and butter. So we've got our email at the bottom of the screen there. Make sure you take that in case you want to reach out as well. And we'll be sharing with you a prioritization matrix at the end. So before I go any further, it'd be really great to understand from you guys a little bit about what is important to you when it comes to food sustainability. And we're just going to look at the procurement and sourcing side of things because, of course, food sustainability also encompasses environmental society challenges. But for this, just to narrow it down and understand what pertinent issues there are for your business, you and your business, which food sustainability challenges are most pressing for you. So if you'd like to grab your phone, take a picture of the QR, we'll do a little Menti poll and you can vote for one of the challenges to help us understand what's important to you. If you don't have a phone, don't worry. Tanvi is going to put the link in the comments so that you can just click on that and do that on your phone, on your laptop. And I'm going to now try and switch my screen over to my other screen so that we can see what's happening with this poll. Excellent. Can you see the Menti? So we've got fair farming, which is about fair trade, embracing biodiversity, animal welfare, sourcing deforestation-free commodities, which is one of the areas we're going to talk about today, healthy soils, plant forward, celebrate local and seasonal, and sourcing seafood responsibly. So if you had to choose just one of these areas to learn more, or pressing because it's important for your brand, what would you vote as the most pressing? So I'm getting quite a lot for supporting fair farming. That's fantastic. So that's around fair trade. So if you're selling a lot of dry goods like tea and coffee and sugar, that would be around fair farming. And then looks like second up, we've got plant forward and less meat. That's great because that is also another area that I'm going to cover this hour. And in third place so far looks like we've got local and seasonal. So that's fantastic. I think the audience has give you a couple of more, another minute maybe to do the voting, because I think we're still seeing numbers come in. So I know it's quite challenging, quite tricky, because all of these areas are important to address. But if you could only choose one, what would it be for you today to learn more about? I see healthy soils coming up, which is fantastic because regen ag is so important, and it is one of the sort of more promising solutions, spaces where businesses are looking to in order to help scale sustainable food and procurement. Oh, we have a tie for plant forward and local and seasonal. So the link does work. So if you're not able to try on your phone or try on your laptop. So we've got tie there. So fair farming, plant forward, and local and seasonal. That's really great. Really love seeing that what areas you're most interested in. So good to know that I will be covering those areas. So you can keep voting on those while we go on. So no worries there, and I'll come back now to my deck. All right. So thanks for that, guys. Moving on to food systems. So I thought what I'd do is actually just define what we mean by food systems before we move forward. I was presenting last week and I went through my whole slides, and at the end someone said, what do you mean by food systems? So let's just get some facts out there and definitions. So when we talk about the food system, and this definition is from City University, where you have the Centre for Food Policy, where I'm also alumni, and this is how we define it at the Centre for Food Policy, and you'll see other varied definitions like Oxford University, but you get the sense that it's very holistic and very broad, and not just about people, and it's also about supply chains. So let's have a look at what we've got in terms of our definition. So the food system, food systems are the sum of actors and interactions along the food value chain, from input, supply and production of crops, livestock, fish, and other agricultural commodities to transportation. So really the whole system of activities that it's about the interconnectedness of the system, and everything and everybody that influences and is influenced by these activities involved in bringing food from farm to fork and beyond. So like I said, very much about the people along the supply chain and the supply chain itself. As you can see from our graphic on the left, it's multifaceted. You've got the politics, so who's making decisions around how we tax, or if we tax sugar and meat, for example. You've got the environmental issues, who's making those policies around how we deal with air pollution, soil pollution, all of these issues from negative impacts from growing our food. And then the social and cultural side, who's to say that we should eat less meat when culturally, for some cultures, it's one way of showing how how we invite friends over and families over to dine with us, and it's a sign of wealth as well. So lots of difficult competing challenges there. So just to go on, I think I'll also ground us in some facts in food systems so that we can really get to understand the enormity of the challenge here. We know that the food system is a leading driver of environmental degradation and responsible for quite a few of the following. First off, we know on the sort of social human side of things, 1 in 10 are going hungry every day, whilst at the very same time, we've got 3 out of 5 people classified overweight or obese. So a real challenge there in terms of how we distribute our food, and there'll be a lot of political challenges there as well. About a third, 30% of our food is lost or wasted, and my colleague Val will talk about that later on. And linked to that, we know that if food waste were a country, it would represent 8% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, and it would be the third highest in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So just to throw out there, does anyone want to take a guess at, who is first and second in terms of countries? Which countries are first and second in terms of their global man-made, human-made greenhouse gas emissions? I'd be happy for you to pop that in the chat and see if anyone comes back with any comments. While you take a guess at that, I'll keep going with these facts. So we've also got NCDs, so non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, responsible for about 71% of the deaths. So this is related to lifestyle choice and the food that we choose to eat. So another reason why those businesses who are manufacturing food, eating out of home businesses really have a responsibility to make healthy options available and accessible and affordable. And then next up, we have, going back to the environmental side of things, 77% of the world's soy is grown to feed animals. You might be asking, well, why is that a problem? So those of you who talked about soil and agriculture earlier on, this is very much linked to monocropping and the fact that we are now focused on growing food for yields and calories, and we're feeding these to animals when we could be feeding them to humans. So real challenge in terms of monocropping, soil health, driving deforestation and biodiversity loss as well. And then linked to that too, on biodiversity, we actually only eat 200 of the 300,000 edible plant species available to us. Again, this is very much linked to yields and calories as a priority over diversity of our diet. So as businesses, we can encourage more diverse options on our menus and in our restaurants, in our retail, in manufacturing. Let's have a look. Oops, I think I'm stuck here. There we go. Antibiotic resistance. Again, you might be wondering, well, what has that got to do with the food system? The challenge we face today is that in industrialized animal farming, we are using way too much of this, too much antibiotics in the system. We're using antibiotics in a routine way rather than on a needs basis, and it's starting to affect the food that we are eating, and we are becoming resistant to antibiotics, and that's a real challenge, especially for those of us who need operations. We really need to start thinking about how we use antibiotics and rethink how we use antibiotics in farming. And then my next stat is around fresh water, given the fact that 70% of fresh water is used up for food growing, and our populations are growing. We have challenges around water scarcity. We have intensity of droughts. All of this is interconnected. Water security is food security, since we need water to grow our food. So really big picture challenges here. And my final stat is that 1/3 of human-made greenhouse gas emissions are from the food system, with half of that coming from the livestock sector. So when you hear about all of these big picture challenges, you have to wonder, okay, what can we do? What can businesses do today? So we'll talk about deforestation a little bit later on, but there are just 4 commodities beef, soy, palm oil, and wood products that are really driving deforestation today. So we really need to think about how we procure our food. So did anybody come back with an answer for the largest emitting countries for greenhouse gas emissions? Hannah?
Most people say China, America, and India.
Great, yeah, spot on. So yeah, you've got the US in first place, and then China, and so very much these large countries. So that's thanks for sharing your answer there. So have a quick look at our framework at Future Green. This is how we define food sustainability for businesses that work with food. And the idea is that we encourage a holistic approach when you work towards solutions. Our three areas are procurement, society, and environment, fully aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, really critical to take a holistic approach. And as you'll see, we won't be covering all of these, but we'll be covering 5. So we'll be covering, let's have a look, deforestation, free commodities, seafood, and plant forward. And then my colleague Val will be looking at food waste and also community. I also wanted to alert you to this fantastic framework on food system sustainability called the Omni Framework. Maybe Tammy can put the link in the comments. It's a fantastic way to ensure that you are looking at the food system challenges in a holistic way, designed specifically to address food system sustainability. And you'll see that UN has backed it, 600 plus organizations around the world have also backed it. So an incredibly important framework if you want to work towards your solutions in a holistic way. So that's all of their kind of very big picture challenges. Let's have a look and dive deep into what you can do about some of these challenges. So very quickly, just look at 3 areas on procurement side now. I'll have just talk you through deforestation, free seafood, and then the plant forward issue. So as I mentioned, really the challenges around deforestation are severe. So let's have a look. What do we mean by deforestation before we go any further? Well, we're talking about deforestation taking place when forests are converted to non-forest use, such as for agriculture or urbanization. And the stats are incredible. 3/4 of all deforestation occurring today is linked to agriculture, unfortunately. So this is predominantly, as I mentioned earlier, it's beef and soy and palm oil. And the problem really lies in when you're feeding grains, for example, to animals rather than for direct human consumption. But then all of those other challenges around monocropping as well are taking place. So when you hear people talking about the reasons for reducing your beef consumption and your ruminant meats, then this is why. So the challenges, as I mentioned, soil and erosion and decreasing productivity when you consider that our populations are growing. This is really something that we need to address. So I thought I would just give a little comparison on, well, what could good look like if we weren't farming the way we farm today, in terms of the predominant way we farm, which has served us well in the past, but now we have the data, we have a clearer understanding that we cannot just keep using up our resources the way we do today. So let's have a look at what today's system looks like compared to a regenerative agricultural system, a system that replenishes and gives more than it takes. So in the current system, we're looking at profit maximization for a very small number of powerful players, whereas in a regen system, it's very much about putting back into the environment and society, not just environment, but also society, than it takes. We're moving from extractive to restorative. We're going away from economies of scale and intensive specialized production to localized and diversifying our production systems. And again, in the current system, maximizing calories, as I said earlier on, calories and yields. And in a regen system, you're looking at maximizing nutrition for public health. And we saw that we're having these health challenges globally earlier on when I talked about obesity and overweight challenges. We're also in the current system externalizing our environmental impacts, meaning that we're not paying the real cost of food today. And in a regen system, we are focusing on resilience, the long term, and conditions to allow our system to thrive and adapt. In the current system, we're also focused on competitive pricing, whereas in the regen system, it's about that connection between consumers and production. We also need to move away from maximizing profit for shareholders and move to a more equitable distribution of value. And as we saw with farming, livestock farming, factory farming, and moving to mixed farming systems. And what do they have in common? They do have things in common. The shared goals are they both are looking to be productive, to be viable, profitable, and safe. So there's just a very quick overview on a solution. And we're seeing some businesses move towards that regen systems because they've realized if we were to survive, the very resources that we're relying on to run our businesses is at risk, then this is a system we need to move to. So some of these very big companies are already supporting and putting budgets to regen ag. So what can you do? It's very much implied source from sustainable suppliers committed to sustainable deforestation-free practices. And you've got some standards there that you can look out for, like RSPO, Rainforest Alliance, and FSC. And if you're a chef or if you're a retailer, there's definitely things you can do. Chefs can diversify the protein on their menus, while retailers should be offering alternative meat and dairy options and increase this in their sales mix. Okay, next up, I'm going to talk about seafood. Don't forget, you can pop your questions in the chat if you have questions as we go along. I know I'm going through this quite at a pace, but I want to make sure that we're sharing some useful, giving some useful value here. So seafood, quite often, fish farming is considered as the silver bullet for these challenges we're facing in shortage of seafood, but it really isn't, because we've moved to these intensive systems, very similar to what we're doing in animal agriculture right now, and it's spreading disease. And what do? We're throwing antibiotics at it and chemicals. So lots of challenges there. We're also seeing challenges in marine fishing, like trawling and dynamite, and that destroys the ocean beds. And we get a lot of bycatch, fish caught by mistake, and it's often returned dead. So this is really a big challenge in the seafood space. About 90% of marine stocks are either fully or overexploited, and there has been modern slavery issues as well, tied to large-scale fishing fleets. So not a silver bullet, but you do have some standards out there that are helpful. You've got the IUCN list for checking if marine caught seafood is at risk of extinction, and you've got a whole load of certification bodies that you can look to. We like the Marine Conservation Society's Good Food Guide because it's very easy to use with the red, amber, green system. And what I wanted to say on this point is when you're looking to procure marine seafood, it's very important to look at the different impacts, not just its carbon factor, for example. Should be looking at, the risk of extinction. There's so many impacts that are interlinked when it comes to sustainability. So that's why we always talk about taking a holistic view, because you might go for one type of fish because it's got a low carbon footprint, but forgetting to look at some of those other impacts. And finally, I'll just touch very quickly on the need to move away from heavy meat diets to more plant-based diets, not necessarily to become vegan or vegetarian or encourage that. Can if you want, of course, but it's very much about if you serve meat in your restaurants, can we shift to sustainable sources, and can we eat less and better quality? So meat consumption in Asia is expected to rise significantly in the coming decades, and that's all driven, as I said earlier on, by growing wealth and urbanization. So it's very important to manage this expectation, because we know that meat production has those huge environmental impacts that we talked about earlier on, including those greenhouse gas emissions and land use change as well. Beef, of course, having the highest carbon emissions, relatively speaking. So let's have a look at some of the issues. So I'm having challenge with my is that moving? Okay, there we go. So yeah, meat consumption will be rising in Asia by 78%. That's predicted by 2050. And another thing to really highlight here actually is that the majority of the carbon footprint of our food comes from the farm stage. So it's very important to look at what you're eating rather than how far it's traveled, because a lot of people assume it's about distance. And yeah, as I said, beef is really one of those ones to look out for in terms of trying to make, if you want to go for a low carbon diet, is to reduce your beef and any ruminant food that you're eating. We're looking at prioritizing high welfare meat. We're looking at organic cage-free eggs for better welfare, and prioritizing poultry and pork. Of course, it depends on the conditions that those animals are raised. And then making plant-based alternatives attractive, and looking at alternative dairy sources such as almond, soy, and oat. Not to say that they don't come with their own challenges, but it's about diversification. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. As I said, for you, please put your questions in the comments, and I'm going to hand over to Val just to cover the environmental issue of food waste, and he'll also cover community. Okay. All right.
All right, thank you, Heidi, for covering the first part on sourcing and procurement. So I will talk about the two other parts of our framework, which are environment and society. So to start with, I'm going to talk about the environment part. And the environment part of our framework is related to the food's direct and indirect impact on the environment in terms of footprint. So core issues we can discuss here include food waste, resource overuse, so thinking about water, energy, plastics, packaging, and carbon footprint in general. So the issue I'm going to cover here is food waste. And food waste has a significant environmental and social impact, including greenhouse gas emission, resource depletion, and hunger. Some statistic here: 1/3 of all the food produced worldwide is lost or wasted. And that's the staggering 931 million tons each year. So food waste really contributes here to resource depletion, including water and land use, as well as economic losses. And I just want to ask you guys if you know where, in what countries is the most food wasted in, and what countries food is usually lost in. So maybe I can give you a couple of seconds. You can put your answers in the chat, and then my colleague will help me to gather some of the answers, so we can see if you have an idea already of where food is wasted and where food is lost. Any answers? All right, if no answers for now, I can go on and then I'll give you the answer. Maybe you just didn't know. So the main pattern here is that in most developed countries, people will tend to waste more food, but then also where the food is lost essentially is also in less developed countries, and especially producers countries, as they might lack the resources to properly store the food and to manage the harvesting in a better way. And on this, to give you another figure, 10% of all the developed countries' greenhouse gas emission actually come from growing food that we don't even eat. That's around 3.3 billion tons of CO2 each year. And I talked a little bit about hunger in the beginning. If we actually manage to just save 1/4 of all the food we waste today, we would be able to feed 870 million hungry people right now in the world. So it really shows that managing and reducing food waste is absolutely essential to promote food security and reducing hunger as well. So now that I talked a little bit about the issue, what can you do? What are some tips for you as an individual, but also as a business, as a restaurant, for you to manage your food waste a little bit better? Monitoring the amount of food waste produced by a restaurant or a food service provider can significantly reduce food waste. And it has been shown that restaurants who measure their food waste and set targets have reduced their food waste by an average of 26%. Also, make sure to ensure good storage condition can also reduce food waste. And it has been shown once again that if you have appropriate storage condition, the lifespan of your food can increase by as much as 50% and reduce food waste once again. Also, things that you can experiment with would be smaller portions. For those who might be in the region and who might be in Hong Kong, it's very usual that we get an unreasonably large portion of rice with the food that none of us can ever finish. So experimenting with small portion can reduce food waste. And it also has been shown in studies that if you just reduce this portion by 25%, then your overall food waste can go as low as 30%. And then, of course, there's going to be some food waste. It's inevitable, but it's also about thinking and finding responsible ways to dispose of your food waste and managing it. So we can think about a lot of solutions that exist, such as redistributing your food in food banks or using some apps for customers. And then if your food cannot be eaten by customers, you can also reuse your food for animal feed. There's a lot of community composting schemes, and also some of you who might have businesses or restaurant might be using any type of digesters. So I did put a couple of apps here on the slide that you can use. Some of them are global, some of them are more regional, are more focused on Asia, but those are apps that you can use to better manage your food waste. And then if you have any other app, any other initiatives or anything that you would like to share, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll be happy to answer your questions and to see what you come up with. So this is my part for the environment. Now we're going to move on to society. And then the question we usually get is, what does society have to do with food sustainability? Well, food sustainability is not only about reducing your environmental impact, it's also about promoting social and economic sustainability. And by creating more sustainable and resilient food systems, we can support local communities, can promote access to healthy and affordable food, and also ensure fair and equitable treatment of workers throughout the entire supply chain. Three of these issues are in our framework, but today I want to focus a little bit on how you can support your community as a food service provider or a business or even an individual. So before we look a little bit about the issues, I want to ask, did you know that 9 out of 10 consumers are actually more likely to support socially responsible businesses and would actually switch to a brand that is associated with a good cause, given similar price and quality? So if you can put in the chat what you think about this, if you would be able yourself, if you would want yourself to be like associated with a brand that is more socially responsible, you can also put this in the chat. And this is a trend that's very evident in the food and beverage industry, where consumers are usually increasingly conscious of the environmental and social impact of their food choices, but also for their own health. However, there are a couple challenges here, especially when it comes to food, like food industry businesses in supporting the community. These social challenges might include high cost, labor shortages, and a focus on growth, and a general lack of awareness. The high cost of doing business, and especially in the region, and especially if you're in Hong Kong, the high rents, for instance, and the labor costs that are usually very high can make it very challenging for F&B outlets or any business to really try to invest resources in socially responsible initiatives. And then, I mentioned that there is a severe labor shortage now, which can make it difficult for F&B outlets once again to spare time and resources to support the community. And that's also an issue if the business is too focused on growth and income generating activities. They might also dedicate less of their time and resources to doing things that are more socially responsible. And then what can you do then? one very simple thing, charitable giving and volunteerism can have a significant impact on the community. And here in Hong Kong, the total value of volunteer work in 2019 was around 10 billion Hong Kong dollars. So there are plenty of ways that you can get involved: donating time, skills, financial support, donating food to food banks. There's many ways that you can help as a restaurant, but also as an individual. So talking about donating food or funds to local food banks and pantries. You can also, if you're a business, offer your space and resources to local community groups for gatherings. You can think about, for instance, a sustainable cooking class, or any other events where you might want to support your local organizations. It's also important to encourage employee volunteerism. It can also be a very effective way to support your community. Employees who volunteer are also more likely to have a positive perception of their employers, and can also promote well-being in general as a whole in the company. There are many other tips. You can also think about offering employment opportunities to ex-offenders, to learning of physically disabled people, and promote social inclusion in general. And then if you don't really know where to start, there are plenty of NGOs and organizations all across the region, in Hong Kong, in APAC, that can support you and that can help you supporting your community. So I put a couple of these up here on the slide. If you have any other organization that you have worked in the past, or you would like to put in the chat, we would be happy to read. And then I'm going to hand it over back to Heidi to summarize everything.
Thanks, Val. So I hope you can hear me now. Yeah, that was just 5 areas of food sustainability that we believe are pertinent to the food sector, the food industry, and of course we went through those pretty quickly. I'm just going to answer some questions I've got so far. And let's see, I think there's a question on what are you supposed to feed animals in relation to the different farming systems. So I suppose the deeper question there, Theo, I think it is, that is, we actually need to change our diets because we just don't have the resources to keep eating meat the way we do as countries become richer and catch up. So this is very much about moving and encouraging people to eat a low carbon diet and diversifying our diet, so moving to more plant-based proteins. And in the meantime, if our animals are grazing, that's great, and they're outside, but the data is showing that we just don't have the resources to continue at the rate we are in terms of animal protein consumption. So diversifying our diets and shifting to what we call sustainable diets, more plant protein as well. And then the other question I have here is the question of why do you think that it's more about what you eat than where it's coming from? So good question. This has been shown through, there's a fantastic chart on Our World in Data that shows that the emissions from the food system is coming from livestock sector rather than from our transport emissions. Transport's only about 8 to 10%. So that's what I mean by choose your food, choose low impact foods rather than just focusing on distance where food has come from in terms of trying to lower your emissions. And that is because livestock and the farm stage has a real outsized impact on our emissions. Okay, so I'll keep going, keep bringing the questions in. So that's great. So moving on. This is the part where I guess is most interesting for you. If you're a business, you're wondering, okay, how does food sustainability really support business? And how do I convince the decision makers in my company that there are business benefits? So the question I suppose to ask you back is, do you feel that it's a moral duty to do what is right or good, or do you think it's a business imperative, or is it just about de-risking, or are you contributing positively to the sector? Knowing that the survival of the industry is at risk, the very resources that we rely on in the food sector is at risk because of all of the reasons I mentioned earlier on. So really let's have a look at what those benefits are, if I haven't convinced you already. So on the environmental side, and you'll see a lot of these issues actually overlap, and that's the idea. They're all very much interconnecting. So we're talking about protecting against rising food costs, so really nurture that relationship with your supplier so that you can start planning ahead. You've got rules and regulations that are coming out, and if you haven't gotten ahead of those regulations or expecting those on packaging, for example, or food waste, you end up scrambling instead of planning. So that's all coming soon. We talked a lot about environmental impact and the cost of that. You can also differentiate yourself as being a responsible business. And as Val mentioned earlier on, if you had two businesses and everything was equal, apples to apples, which business would young people today where would people want to put their money? Obviously, they would go for the more sustainable brand if everything was equal. Improving brand reputation as well, that's linked to that on Gen Z, and then this one on the social, so you can see the social is starting to overlap with the environmental. Redistribution of food, we talked about that in terms of food waste. We do have a waste triangle, which is a hierarchy, and the best solution was always to feed humans. So you might have all of these other solutions and fancy tech, but really the best solution is to be able to manage it so that you can feed another human with your surplus food. Of course, improving staff motivation, especially these days now with younger generation really asking these questions when they go for jobs. These issues are very much interlinked. So for example, you can improve staff. If you improve staff motivation, you're more likely to retain your staff and reduce turnover. And ultimately that will reduce your costs to hire staff, right? And it's the same with, if you're talking about interlinkages, if you make more efforts to monitor and measure your waste and your energy, you could potentially be saving. And to some stats, that's about between 6 and 10%. And again, filtration water, because we've been working with our members on filtration water systems. For us, it's a no-brainer. If your country, your territory has clean tap water, you should be using filtration water systems in your outlets for eliminating plastic waste. And one of our members was able to save space. Their staff could drink high-quality water, and she got her ROI back in 1 month by putting in a filtration water system, and eliminated all of her plastic water bottles and her imported glass bottles as well. So, and then lastly, on the economic side, reducing costs and increasing competitiveness. So I'll just give you a couple of case study examples that really bring to light how sustainability has created value. So if we're talking about cost reduction, Kin Food Halls, which is a nice brand new food hall, probably about 6 to 12 months old now, just opened, and they told us that they saved 64% in energy costs thanks to their UV tech exhaust hoods. So that's using modern technology to really control these energy costs. And Amber, one of our 2 Michelin star restaurants here in Hong Kong and president of Future Green, who we work with very closely, we talked about his switch over to a more expensive cornstarch-based cling film, yet over time he was able to reduce the cost because they ran an audit and they realized they didn't need 80% of the cling film they were using. So taking the time to really make an effort to get audited and look at those processes regularly can really help. And then on revenue growth, one of our cafes here, Spicebox Organics, they saw a 20% increase in their income in 2019 when they opened a new location selling sustainable and ethical products, and opening a new cooking studio. And they're just a small chain, 2 or 3 shops. In contrast, a very big supermarket in the States. This is really fantastic for the big retailers out there listening. A giant supermarket, they were able to increase sales by 250% during the weekend that they launched their sustainability ratings, these labels on food to inform the customer how sustainable these food products were. So it really is an opportunity to differentiate yourself. On risk mitigation, one of our restaurants here, Mono, worked very closely with farmhouse productions directly and collaborated with regional suppliers. So they kept that relationship close and were able to switch. So Mono is a South American restaurant purchasing quite a lot of cocoa, and they were able to switch from a South American supplier to a Taiwanese cocoa supplier. And finally, brand and reputation. So we've got Moxie and Organic. I'm talking about Hong Kong here since we're based here, but we've seen that these brands have positioned themselves as sustainable brands. Moxie is a 70% plant-based restaurant, and Organic, along with Amber and another restaurant in Hong Kong, have Michelin green stars. So really lots of opportunity there to put food sustainability on the map. Okay, so then now you're thinking, okay, what's a solution to all of this? How can a business really get the message out there that they are working on sustainability and really making big strides in a serious way? So we work with businesses, supermarkets, restaurants, caterers, and we always try to focus on the big picture. And one thing we do is encourage businesses to design a food vision. And this is how we do it. We workshop it through with teams, with marketing teams, with HR, with product developers, with chefs, and we look at the purpose. What's the purpose of your business? And then try to identify the ambition as well, because you want to understand if you're leading or if you are just following, and really how much budget you're going to put to this project, because it's going to require budget, and that will inform your strategy. And then finally, what actions you're going to take. So we like to do this, and we do it through what we call sprints as well. So if you're interested, or if you have any questions about what we've shared with you today, I think we've only got about 10 minutes left. We will be running a lunchtime Q&A at 12 o'clock on Friday 8th. So you can take a picture of the QR code, or we'll pop the link directly in the comments as well. We'd love to answer your questions at more length. If you'd like to just get into some more of the detail on anything we've discussed, or any of the food visioning work that we've done as well. So are there any more questions coming through? I'm just going to have a quick look here. Great. Okay, let me just share quickly webinar 2 that we're doing on Wednesday 4th as well. If you are interested in what a food vision is, we would love to share how we do these sprints through training, and then refining and doing the road mapping using the sprint method, which is inspired by Jake Knapp from Google's book. So a lot of innovation workshops to bring teams together. So do sign up for that when we put that out as well. And to finish off, before I answer any more questions, these are some of the businesses that we've worked with in the last 3 years, and they're all on different stages of their journey. But to suffice to say that everybody is on a different part of their journey, and anyone can get started, and you can get started today. If you only remember 3 things, because I know I've given you so much information, we have shared so much content with you today. The 3 things that you could take away are, given that food and climate are interlinked. Firstly, food is both the cause and is affected by climate change. It's responsible for a whopping 30% or a third of our global greenhouse gas emissions. So we do have to address it. It is urgent. Waste less food, and finally, increase your plant-based consumption. And none of these things on food waste or plants require policy change. You can do them on an individual level, and you can also do them in your businesses as well. We have an option for you to have a 30-minute call with us as well about any of these issues. Just take a picture of the QR code to get your spot on our calendar, and we've also got the link in the chat. So it'd be great to hear from you there as well. So, okay, I'm going to have a look through the questions here, which Hannah has kindly popped in. So somebody says here, let me go from start. Use cases for food waste. Well, so some of the businesses that we worked with, when it's really worked for them, one of our businesses, Private Club, their team was super happy when they were able to get a machine so that they didn't have to walk up the stairs anymore. There's lots of little positives like that can get your teams engaged. We can answer that one in a bit more depth, I think, on the Q&A use cases. Eating meat once a month. I don't think it's our position really to talk about how often we eat meat, but suffice to say that we absolutely need to be reducing our meat intake, and it also depends on the kind of meat you're eating, how it was produced, and also stage of life. A teenager is going to need more protein than maybe someone in their mid-20s, 30s. So there's lots of factors that you have to consider. Let's have a look. Just see if there's any more questions. Somebody's asked about the cling film, so we'll share these details in our Q&A, I think. And then there's a few people having challenges with the YouTube links. Okay.
There are a number of seafood poisoning out there.
Let's have a look. Seafood poisoning. I don't know if we can really comment on seafood poisoning. I think, as always, with any kind of food you procure, you need to be looking at how the food was produced, and are you able to have a relationship with your supplier or your fisher? I know in Hong Kong it's very difficult, but we do have locally available seafood. So having those relationships and tight relationships will reduce your chances of having any challenges. But I don't think I can really comment on seafood poisoning. That would be a food safety question, really. So any more questions? Can you see any more questions coming through? Okay, so I've got one here. Which are the typical sustainability factors while selecting suppliers, production processes and transportation modes in the food industry? What are the typical sustainability factors? So if you're talking about transport, it's usually asking questions around vehicles. So those of you doing ESG reporting will know in Scope 3 you have to ask about this kind of thing, what your suppliers are using and how they operate. Typical sustainability factors. I don't think there really are any typical, because it really depends on what the businesses have declared material. But given that, when we say the top 3 things that you can do that will have the biggest impact is meat reduction and reducing the waste, I think those would be the things that we would be looking out for. Of course, if you're procuring dry goods, you're going to be looking for standards like fair trade and Rainforest Alliance, standards for sugar as well, for fair farming. So I hope that one answers your question. But do feel free to join us in our 1-hour Q&A if you have more questions. I know we shared a lot of content here. If not, I think that's the end of our Q&A. So what I'd love to do is to get your feedback. It'd be really great to hear from you, what you found useful. I've got a minute left here. What you found useful and what we could improve. If Tambi could pop the link into the comments, be great. And if you've done that, it'd be amazing. If you could sign up for our newsletter if you found that useful. And we are quite active on LinkedIn, so you can find a ton of stories on there from us as well. The recording will be shared, so don't worry there. We will have it on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it back. And if anybody missed it or you just want to catch up and re-listen, yeah, we will be sharing it again. We'll be running a few more webinars over the next few months as well, so do look out for that. If you felt this was useful, just let us know in the feedback so we can do more of these great webinars. So I think we're up on the hour. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and really grateful to have your time here. think we're out of time.